again, thank you guys for coming out tonight. This means the world to me as someone who engages in a very solitary pursuit, sitting in your office and closing the door, and you're working on this for 6 years, especially over the last 6 years, which have been a little bit of a roller coaster for all of us. I think that we can all agree on that. It was therapeutic, as I write in the book, it was therapeutic a lot of times for me to be able to close the door and focus on, some stats from the 1985-86 team, for example, or, to be able to pick up the phone. I want everyone in their lives should be able to have that goosebump moment, that catch your breath in your throat kind of moment, when I picked up the phone one morning and I heard, "Hey, Chris, this is Ron Francis." And I had to take a second. I literally had to take a second and go, okay, all right. Ron Francis for the book. I have to be very professional here.
Yeah.
Or when Kevin Deneen calls you and you have a great 40-minute conversation, and then he calls you back to tell you more stories about Draft Bonanza, that kind of stuff. That's so, it just hit me right here. It was the perfect story for me, for a perfect time in my life to be able to go back and revisit this. And it was a kick. It was so much fun to do. Again, I pray that all of you can have yourself. You feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. To be able to put something like this together and talk to almost 100 people, players, coaches, media, fans, it was a kick to be able to talk to Stu Gavin, to be able to hear some Dave Tippett stories, to be able to hear some Tiger Williams stories, or Kelly Chase. It just went on and on and on and on and on. It was just so much fun to do. I came by my Hartford Whalers fandom, honestly. I grew up in Farmington and we moved to Suffield, and it was more fun to live in Farmington because you were closer to Hartford and you were closer to some of the players, and you could see Jordy Douglas at Wendy's, just out of the blue. You could see, you had a greater chance of seeing Gordie Howe at Friendly's, and so that really kind of hit home for me. I never got a jersey until I got older and started making money and following for myself, but I had a Whalers t-shirt, a Mark Howe t-shirt. I spent all of my paper route money at the gift shop. Whether it was pens and notebooks or, the 45 of Brass Bonanza or whatever the case may be. It was great because there was a level of, and we were talking before, there was a level of possession with this team that was you didn't really get before UConn basketball became the all-consuming sporting monolith that it is now. This was big time sports in Connecticut. This was what you cared about on a daily basis. You didn't have to choose for the first time in your life as a kid. You didn't have to choose between the Bruins and the Rangers, or the Red Sox and the Yankees, or the Patriots and the Giants, or the Jets. You had your own team that was just right up the road, and the community was strong enough where you could run into Dave Tippett or Mike Liu at the corner store, and it wouldn't be that big a deal. I met Howard Baldwin when I was a kid, and Howard uses the phrase, he used it with me, he's used it before. Hartford was the Green Bay of hockey. It was a small, intimate community. It was a small market community. And as we heard before, it developed a really tight fan base, a really good, close-knit fan base. I think back to the phrase that Dom Amore from The Current told me. He said, in the end, the Whalers didn't have as many fans as some other fan bases, but the people they had, they really had. They were in 100%, just, all the time, all 41 home games, traveling up to Boston. They were totally and completely, everybody bought in. And I think that's what distinguished this team from a lot of their teams out there. The fact that there was that sense of community, the fact that the guys stayed around in the summer. They didn't go to their other homes. They didn't go south. They didn't go west. They didn't go north. They stayed around in the summer. They played in charity golf tournaments. They were exact charity softball tournaments. They were there. They were part of the community. That's why God bless him. And I talked to Alan Hangslaven for a podcast. I do a Whalers podcast too online. And I talked to Alan Hangslaven. He says the worst day in my life when I was traded away. Worst day of my life when I left the Whalers. Because he was never able to replicate that kind of community. Wherever he went in the National Hockey League to be able to have that connection with the fans because it was small. Not just because the people, there were people, the players were really, good in the community. It was a small fan base. It was a small fan base. It was a small community. And the connections that were made there continue to live on. The guys come back every summer. 20 or 30 of them come back every summer for the Whalers weekend that the Argos put together. This is the team that's been gone for almost 30 years. And they still come back. They still love it. And I don't look, I'm not naive enough to think that it doesn't exist anywhere else. But at the same time, I can tell you, the California Golden Seals aren't having a reunion every summer. The Atlanta Flames aren't getting together for, going to Braves games as a group every summer. It was something unique, and it was something very special about this team and the way they connected with people. And I hope I was able to communicate just a little bit of that in the book. Again, I had a chance to talk to almost 80 plus people. My favorite interviews, I don't think I could, like I said, you could knock me over with a feather after I hung up with Ron Francis.
Oh, yeah.
I dined out on that for a month with my friends. I love talking to the tough guys. The Kelly Chase was fantastic. Kelly Chase, and I don't know if it's just something in their nature that they don't care, that they can just they don't have a filter. But guys like Kelly Chase, Adam Bird, Tori Robertson, those guys, they gave up some great stories. And the other thing that's important too is that when you're talking about interviews, you don't want to dismiss anyone just because they were a little further down on the depth chart, for lack of a better term. Some of my favorite interviews were with guys who were third line guys, backup goaltenders, Cap Raider, from the 1970s, who was absolutely fantastic, who was just completely unfiltered. Bill Bennett.
Oh, yeah.
Big tough guy, played with the Bruins, played with the Whalers, just didn't care. He's responsible for, I would say, maybe 40% of the vulgarity in that book. They just don't care. The tough guys don't care. But it was just most of the conversations with those guys, not so much for the tough guys, but most of the conversation would start relatively cautiously, where they would say, okay, well, what are you doing? But tell me a little bit about what you're doing and where you're from, and which makes sense. You kind of have to have an interview subject warm up to you a little bit. And by the end, they were giving me email addresses and phone numbers and saying, oh yeah, sure. I know this guy, I'll have him give you a call, and I'll be able to connect, because they all know each other, or most of them know each other when they play together. So it was just, again, the thing that I keep coming back to was it was such an intensely personal book for me because of my connection to the team, but the chance to tell their stories was an absolute kick for me. So that's my spiel. If you guys have any questions, I can sign afterwards, but if you guys have any questions, I know we were talking before just about I was talking with some folks before about Chuck Caton, being able to talk to Chuck Caton, who is the voice of the Whalers. And I'm so glad that he was able to eventually get a ring with the Carolina Hurricanes. Those guys are the heroes of the book. The guys like Chuck Caton and Skip Cunningham. Skip Cunningham was one of the first hires as the equipment manager, and he stayed with the team. They moved to Carolina. He stayed with it. It was just he was fantastic. He told a lot of fun stories. One of my favorite ones was the first year that they were in existence in 1972. This is in the book. There was a robbery. About $10,000 worth of equipment was stolen from their first. This was a locker room at what is Northeastern University now, when they played at Boston Arena. And they got attack dogs. They had to get attack dogs, and they ended up forgetting something. They were heading out for a road trip, and they ended up forgetting something back at the back in the locker room, and no one wanted to go back because they were afraid of the attack dogs. So it's just fun stories like that. Being able to talk to the people who really were just, you know, the people who had the same thread through, you know, you could chart their course in the 70s all the way to the 90s. Being able to talk with them and getting some of those old stories, it was really a kick.
And I haven't read the book yet. Being you're in Boston, did you get a chance to talk to Newmeyer?
You know, that was one of the great regrets for this book. Numi was very, very helpful. But he was fantastic. He was like, oh yeah, I got this guy's number, and he put me in touch with some of the guys from the 70s, and he kept kind of pushing me off and saying, oh, we'll talk down the road. We'll talk down the road. We'll talk down the road. And I was literally supposed to talk to him. I had scheduled an interview with him, and we're like, okay, we're going to sit down. And then I found out that he passed away.
Yeah.
And it was just, that was tough. That was tough.
You think he wanted to talk about the Whalers?
I think he wanted to talk about the Whalers, but I don't think he was physically
Right.
ready to talk about, you know, to kind of sit through an interview and kind of, not that I'm going to browbeat him, but he's just kind of,
We call the best games ever.
yeah, he was.
No
He
one,
was.
no one ever called the game.
Have you heard, and it's very, very rare, but the audio from the brawl in the mall.
The back.
Yeah,
Right.
the B-side where he and Bill
Minnesota.
Rasmussen.
Wow.
This was for you guys who don't know, this was a fight back in the 1970s with Minnesota. And it was a legendary brawl. There's no video that exists. There's no film of it. There's no video. The only thing we have is the B-side to Brass Bonanza. The first B-side to Brass Bonanza was his description of the fight. And he and Bill Rasmussen basically at one point said, okay, you called the action on the left-hand side, I'll call the action on the right-hand side. It was just
meet in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was like an hour-long brawl. It was absolutely epic. And then one of the upshots from that story is Bill Rasmussen was the guy who went on to found ESPN.
Right.
Yeah. So it was just, but yeah, I really wished that I could have had a chance to sit down with him, but he passed away literally in the final stages of, you know, kind of pulling this thing together. We never were able to connect.
Sorry, you said you enjoyed talking to tough guys, and you interviewed Chris Whalen, an island in the book.
Oh yeah.
Did you do it because of his NHL or because he's a Northeastern guy?
Well, it's a little bit because of Northeastern. Don't think I didn't play that card. I'm a Northeastern guy too, so I kind of weaseled my way in. I'm a Husky as well, man. Yeah, so you know, talk to me. Yeah, he was responsible for about another 2/3 of the profanity. You know, for that. Again, maybe it's the tough guys. I don't know, but Nyland was great. Nyland said something I thought was really, really fast. He said a lot of stuff that was really fascinating, but one of the things that Nyland said was when he was going to games at Boston Arena, he would sneak in with his friends and he saw Larry Plow playing professional hockey. And he said, look, as a local kid, Plow was from Lynn, you know, Knuckle was from, I think, West Roxbury, if I remember correctly. He's like, that made an image, that made an imprint on him. That I saw that and I was like, I can play in the NHL. I can do this. If there's another local guy who's doing this, I can do this. So yeah, the other great thing about Nyland was, and it was very odd. Again, he's completely unfiltered, completely just does not care. And I literally had to go back a couple of times with him. I don't know if you've read it yet, the Nyland passages in the book. Yeah. I literally had to go back a couple times and say, are you sure you want to say that? And that's a great gift for any, you know, journalist to get. You sure you want to be saying these things? He called, I set up an interview with him and he called me on Sunday morning at 8:00, which is a little odd.
I just got home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's yeah. Yeah, I probably did just get home. That's a great point. Yeah, I always, in one of my dream projects down the road would be to do a biography of Chris Nyland, you know, because whew, that guy has some stories, man. That guy, you know, if you believe half the stuff, you know, you believe half the stuff that's been said about him. He ran around with Whitey Bulger. He's got some stories in him. And maybe I'll play that Northeastern card again.
You gonna do a book too? Then I can give you a ton of stories.
You know, it's funny because people are. I've been contacted by a couple of guys from the Whalers, including, Cunningham. So you
Yeah.
kind of do it like a life in
He's
hockey
in
book.
Windsor.
Yeah, he's just to do some of those. I feel bad because I do now. Like again, I do a Whalers podcast, and I wasn't able to get, for example, I wasn't able to get Paul Lawless for the book, but I got him on the podcast, and he's great. He's fantastic. Tells unbelievable stories. He told one about his relationship with and we talked about this in the podcast. His relationship with Ray Ferraro. Ray Ferraro is like a world-class trooper. Just talked about everyone, talked about your family, talked about your mom, talked about your dad, talked about your kid, would just do anything to try to get under guys' skin. And he was talking one night to Mark Messier. And Messier, of course, like a 6'6" monster,
On the ice?
Yeah. He's talking to Messier, and he's jabbing at him, and he's talking, and he's sitting next to Paul Lawless and Ray Ferraro are sitting next to each other on the bench, and Ferraro is continuing to chirp at Messier. And Messier looks over, and the minute Messier looks over, Ray Ferraro ducks down to tie his skates. And Messier looks over, and Lawless is like, that's this guy. So, but I did this an example of like stories that could still, that are still kind of floating around out there about the Whalers that could be, we could end up doing. So, hey, you never know. You never know. My only request is done this, this one doesn't take 6 years. We do it a little shorter than 6 years.
How about, they had a really strong following, the ladies really liked them a lot. And especially when I remember back in the 80s and when they were really hitting their stride at that particular point in time. They had some pretty wild parties. Did you ever get to hear any the other side of, find some of them?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. One thing I did know that was Kevin Deneen was the social director.
Oh, yeah.
And would make sure that, they would, pick the restaurant or pick the establishment that they will go out to in Montreal or Toronto or Calgary or something. He would always know someone in that city who could get him in somewhere, who could talk to someone, knew someone who knew someone, or could grease a palm, or, whatever the case may be. There were times where I heard that they would take, how can I say this off the record?
Remember, we are recording this.
Exactly. Could get back to people. They would take younger relatives out and get them drunk for the first time who were along the road trips. Things like that, where
Because they were just kids themselves.
they were,
yeah.
and I'm glad you bring this up, because in that context, I think it's really important that they were super close. Those late 80s teams, mid to late 80s teams, those Whalers teams were really super close. And I think that's one of the reasons why they were as successful as they were, because the roster was greater than the sum of its parts. That you spent all this time with these guys, you would know them, you would be able to lean on them. You knew what their tendencies were, what they liked, what they didn't like, that kind of stuff. And I think that showed a lot of times on the ice. And for me too, I think there was a story in The Athletic about this a couple of years ago. The team from 85 to 87 could be remembered as the smartest team in the history of hockey, because they have over two-thirds of that roster from 85 to 87 went into hockey in some form or fashion after their time was done as players. Whether it was GM, Ron Francis, Pat Verbeek, obviously Verbeek came later, but there were guys, the coaches, Tippett, Evison, Quenneville, yeah. I mean, TD, Ray Ferraro, Mike Liu's one of the most powerful agents in hockey right now. So these guys, there was a reason why they were so successful. There were a good group of guys, and they had a great hockey IQ. So, but yeah, there are some party stories in the book. Not anything more maybe than PG-13 related, but there are some party stories in the book.
I was working at a rock station in Hartford back then, Kiss FM, and they were always connecting at all these get-togethers.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah. No, it was one of them. One of the guys told me that, and this was actually in the early 90s. Their unofficial team motto was "Win or lose, we'll drink the booze." You can imagine.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You can imagine. So
Well, Doug Huda is assistant coach, I think, for For Detroit, he's on with the Detroit guys. He's part of the coaching staff.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's a bunch of guys. I mean, we were talking before, Sean Burke.
Yeah.
Was another one of those guys. There's a bunch of guys on that. There was a bunch of guys and again, obviously Burke is a little bit later, but it's no coincidence that these guys have all stuck around the game of hockey. So
You think if Baldwin, stuck around on the team, they would have stuck around?
yeah, they do. I do. I think if he'd been able to pull together a consortium of guys with deep pockets, because, and again, this was even Howard, can tell you, he was the front, he was the face of it, but there were guys behind him who had, who had, more skin in the game, financial skin in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a stability thing. And then, they were forced to sell. And, you could point to, it was a whole chain of events from like 89 to like, it's look, I'm not gonna run down UConn basketball, but the Tate George jump shot, marked the ascendance of UConn men's basketball.
Yeah.
You can blame Northeastern for that.
Exactly. Yeah, like Jim Calhoun, Jim Calhoun movement. If Jim Calhoun had stayed at Northeastern, but there were a whole series of events. It was a whole thing, and they picked the other thing too. They picked up the worst possible time to become mediocre. Because UConn basketball was becoming so good. And if I'm an advertiser, if I'm in the media, who am I going to go with? Who do I want to be associated with? A team that's perennially, UConn, men's and women's, were competing for national championships, and the Whalers were first rounded out. They got bumped off TIC Sunday. So it's like they, like I said, they just picked the worst possible time to start that backslide. And I think you could trace a lot of that backslide back. And there's a series of things. There's UConn becoming really, really good. There is the Ron Francis trade, but part of that conversation is Howard Baldwin selling the team.
Yeah, I know that was one of the things that some friends of mine that were, when he was out in California, and they were basically saying that if he was going to make it, if he was going to do the commitment, that he really did have to move back in, open an office in Hartford, and be here, and he really did.
Yeah.
He gave 1,000% into that. That was for sure. He was committed to that.
Yeah. There's a bit of, how can I
Bitterness.
gently say this? Yeah, but with Howard, there's a bit of Harold Hill, in part of it is kind of showmanship and kind of, but he had, and Jerry Brooks, God bless him, the Connecticut newsman, he said in the book, he's like, Howard had duende. There's the George Fraser line from the Boston Columnist, where it's just like charisma and like style, and like, you want to follow this guy. But he also had balls. He was like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna get thousands of people to buy in, and damn it, we're gonna make this happen. And he's Harold Hill. He's marching down the middle of the street, 76 trombones and all that. And when it clicks, man, it really clicks. But when you remove that from the equation,
Yeah, he was.
it can be tough.
I remember going up to his office, and he had a giant poster of Matthew McConaughey there. And I guess he said it was like almost like a godfather, godson type of thing.
Yep.
Because another friend of mine is Pat Sheehan, who was very close with Baldwin, and he said, "Oh yeah, because we had worked on a commercial with it was for beef, and it was a national radio commercial for beef. That's what's for dinner." And Matthew McConaughey does the first 30 seconds. And my company, which was CRN International, was a radio promotion company all over the country. So I'd be the guy that went in there, and I would tag it for all the different markets, go to Wally's steak store, whatever. So Pat goes, "You want me to have Matthew just pick up the pace a little bit more?" But then when I went to the office and I saw that huge poster, because especially after the whole thing with producing Ray and all that, he had a great run in Hollywood too.
Yeah, and he's doing. I can say a little bit about this. I've talked to him on a couple of occasions. He's in the process of putting together a piece on a larger project on the history of the WHA, which I think is going to be through Apple TV, which should be a lot of fun because he's got a lot of good people. He's got a lot of good people behind it. So, you spend 5 minutes talking to Howard Baldwin, you will just. What do you need me to do, Howard? Let's go. Let's do it.
What, comment, or also your thoughts on it? I always marvel. Today, you can go to any store and buy merchandise.
Yep.
My neighbor next door
Yep.
is half my age. He's wearing a whaler shirt. I'm like, yeah. Because he wouldn't understand. What are your thoughts? Why is it relevant? Why is it?
Because it's awesome.
Yeah.
It is the greatest logo and I'm biased here when I say this, but it's the greatest logo in North American professional sports history. It really is. When you stack it up against whatever. Like I was watching the Bruins Lightning game the other day, and the Lightning have like these fourth alternate uniforms with the flames on the sleeve, the flames on the sleeves and stuff. It's a simple classic. The genius is not only the W, but the hidden H
Yep.
and the
Yep.
tail,
Yeah.
and just there's like 5 different things you got to look for in that. And it's remarkable to me how that's continued to sustain. And I think that's part of the reason why people it still resonates with people. It's because it's the logo. It's the greatest logo.
There's young kids wearing hats and like.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know what you're wearing.
I talked to Bob Crawford, who's still in Connecticut, who just says that now his kids and his grandkids will look at the logo and be like, you were cool. Look at that. See the original logo. Oh, that was cool. If you ever get a chance to, and for the life of me, I can't remember where it is now, but Peter Good's store, Chester,
Connecticut.
the guy who designed the logo.
Oh,
It literally took him an afternoon. And he ran a bunch of looks past Howard. And they were like, well, okay, that one worked right there. And now it would be road tested to death. It would be, it literally took him an afternoon. He said he was great. He said the old logo was the W and the harpoon, the WHA logo. And he said there's a dissonance there because the harpoon kills whales. You don't want to kill your logo. So, and if you go online, you could do a Google search for there's a handful of different looks that he had. There was like a trident with 3 of them going up like this. But they settled on this, and he says there is not a week that goes by where I don't see that out and about somewhere. Now the question is, the real story is it's still up in the air as to who owns the logo.
And
Legal.
the NHL does now,
Yeah, okay.
because Connecticut didn't retain it. There was a 10-year span.
Yeah.
And the Hartford just didn't retain it. It was ours for 10 years at least. And then they didn't do anything about it. They didn't claim it.
Peter signed a check. Peter signed, he was given $2,000 for the logo, for designing the logo.
You had to know.
Yeah, but then the other thing is, he sells stuff at his place in Coventry with property of Peter Good. He sells the logo, and the NHL looks the other way and kind of says, you can just go and do your thing with this. But yeah, if you ever get a chance to go, and he's got great stuff online. It's Peter Good. He's the guy who created it. He gets all of the credit. And it's funny, we were talking before about Binghamton, the Whalers, the minor league affiliate for a while. The genius move was turning it on its side, and so it's a B, so like that. Perfect. Just
now, where's his location?
I don't know if they still have their store, but they had a store where the old, when you go down into the center of Chester, you take a right to go like down the main street. After was an old liquor store. It used to be a prison, and it was right in there. His wife's last name is Cummings.
What does he?
It's not good.
He's a graphic designer.
You can look them up on Facebook.
he does,
Yeah.
he does a lot. He still does a lot of design work.
They do calendars every year, like those long, narrow calendars. He did a lot of graphics, a lot of design work, a lot of logos for companies and other things, but if you look up Peter Good, you can still find him.
Is it
What it-
good with an E on the end?
No,
No,
Just
no.
good.
No.
Plain old
His
good.
business is Cummings and Good.
yeah, that's Cummings and Good.
Cummings and Good.
Cummings, but, and my husband lived in Binghamton, but he also lived in Simsbury, and he's like, where's Randy Ladicore?
A lot of store.
Leslie.
A lot of store.
He's like, where is he? Because he lived next door to him. I'm like, I don't know where he is, but I'll ask.
Laddie,
He didn't see him in the book, he said.
I think he passed away.
Okay.
Laddie.
Yeah, I think he passed
He
away.
was young.
I think you could Google, I think, yeah, there was a reason,
Really?
yeah.
Oh, no,
I
I
think
gotta.
everyone's Googling, everyone's giving you a lot of syrup. Number 18.
Year after year at Halloween, apparently. And Sim Boring has so he was eager to read the book and he felt sad that, but I said you couldn't talk to every single whaler that was. What
That was-
percentage of whalers do you think you spoke to, former whalers?
I talked to probably about 60 players.
Wow, that's a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah, and I would literally, and I joke about this in the book, and I'm not gonna get political here, but I write in the book, I said, you know, Facebook may be soulless and evil, but it's great for looking up ex-whalers. I was able to find, like, I could put someone's name into Facebook if I knew I wanted to talk to them, and their account would, there's Sylvain Cote. I'll be able to I'll message him, I'm working on a book on the whalers. Which led to a really funny story. I went to Facebook to look up Jean-Sebastian Jaguar,
Oh, yeah.
goaltender. Oh, this is great. The last guy. Oh, you know, the last guy who played for the Whalers before retiring. He did like in 2006 or something. He retired. This is great. I connected with Jean-Sebastian Jaguar on Facebook. Oh, hey, I'm Chris Price. I'm writing a book about the Whalers. And he says, and you look at his thing and I'm like, oh, okay, this looks like he could be the guy, the age and everything. Turns out he's like, no, you've got the wrong Jean-Sebastian Jaguar. Okay, all right.
What are the chances?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like, how many guys in the world named Jean-Sebastian Jaguar? I'm like, it may. Yeah,
I think it's.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the
Yeah,
concern.
let's talk to this guy.
Yeah, exactly. It turns out it's like, no. So no, so it was, yeah. So there were. I found.
Yeah, he's not, he's still.
You still on? Okay, good.
He went down and played for the Mighty Ducks and
Yes.
Oh,
I think is he a scout now? I think he is. I can't remember.
That I don't
didn't even
know.
follow him, but.
Yeah, I'm currently trying to work to get Doug Sullivan on my podcast, who is in Florida, who was just impacted by the last fall, was impacted by the hurricanes down there. We were kind of, trying to connect with each other, but yeah, Facebook. I find guys through Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and just email addresses kind of, they've been passed along,
They're super fans,
exactly. Yeah.
fan club.
Who couldn't you get? Did anyone avoid you or?
What was really interesting, the one guy who I really wanted,
You got the other one.
one of the one guys, there's like a short list, but one of the guys who I tried, and there's two guys who instantly stick out to me as guys who I tried, but just they didn't want to talk, were Marty Howe
mhm.
and Rick Lee.
Oh.
And it was a little,
Knocked on Marty's door in Glastonbury.
I know, yeah, but I emailed him.
You still around?
Yeah. I met him at the Whalers alumni thing a couple of years ago. Had a very pleasant conversation. Both of them had a very pleasant conversation. I said, I'm working on a book about the Whalers. I would love to get a chance to speak with you. We exchanged email addresses and
Wow.
nothing. I connected with I'll say this, Mark Howe, dynamite.
Mhm.
I had like an hour-long conversation with Mark Howe. He was fantastic. He was everything I hoped he would. He told some great stories. He talked, good, bad, historic, whatever. But Marty Howe just said, and I can respect guys who just don't want to talk, and Marty, probably the way it ended for him as a player, probably doesn't want to go back and revisit a lot of that. So I'm like, okay, it's not, and honestly though, I did want to talk to Rick Lee because, you want to talk about people who are common threads, 70s, 80s, 90s, he was, yeah, he was dynamite. So yeah, but I found when I posted that the book was coming out on Facebook, Rick Lee gave me a little thumbs up, and so it's like, okay.
Didn't Gretzky think that Gordy was the best that ever was?
Yeah. And the other thing too, hey, while we're here, a little thing that's the thorn that still sticks with me is we're not counting WHA stats here. They don't count for WHA stats in the NHL scoring. Like everyone's talking about, oh, Ovechkin is going to pass, Wayne Gretzky. Well, not with his WHA numbers, he's not. So that's a personal thing for me. And I've put it on social media a couple times, a little snarky little comment about, who was it? I want to say it was Patrick Marleau, who set some sort of record. I don't know if it was like a consecutive games played record, but he broke Doug Jarvis's record.
Yeah,
And I posted a picture of like Doug Jarvis is like, nothing but respect for my Iron Man, and people are like, what do you mean? But yeah, that's a thing that still sticks in my craw a little bit, that we're not taking WHA numbers into account, at the very least the last couple of years, because Gretzky is still
You didn't have a lot of WHA, did you?
no
yeah, well,
a couple of years.
he was
Not many.
17.
Yeah.
He was 17 when he started.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then
well,
the Indianapolis Racers.
Oh my God.
Indianapolis Racers. You want to find finding a needle in a haystack is finding Gretzky and Indianapolis Racers.
There's a group that doesn't get together.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And it's funny, you talk about Gretzky and Edmonton, and we talked about Messier before. I think one of the things that would have helped hockey survive in Hartford was, look, Edmonton is just as much of an outpost as Hartford is. Edmonton had one of the greatest hockey teams of all time, and arguably one of the, I don't care what you think of him, one of the 2 or 3 greatest hockey players of all time. If they had a guy like Glenn Sather and a guy like, I'm not going to say a guy like Gretzky, but if he could have put together a team that could have won a cup or 2, then things might have been.
Oh, right.
Exactly. That's my next project, by the way. I'm working with a couple of friends. We're trying to put together a documentary about the Ron Francis trade. The worst trade in the history of hockey. And how it set 2 teams on opposite courses. We're talking, fingers crossed, we're talking with the NHL Network. But we have commitments from a bunch of people in an honorary capacity, Ron, Kevin Dineen, Craig Patrick, all of the principals involved, so fingers crossed.
We have something to look forward to, a companion book, maybe.
I'm still looking for my next book project. I might end up working a little bit with Howard on the WHA thing. Maybe a companion book to that. I don't know, but there's a couple of really good WHA books. One called The Rebel League. And if you want to get a lot of great wild WHA stories, not a lot of whaler stuff, but a lot of really fun wild WHA stories. That's a good book to look for. It's on Amazon. I shouldn't say that here, but it's out there. The Rebel League. It's worth picking up though if you're a hockey historian. And a lot of what I did, I don't want to say my book wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that book, but they did a good job laying the groundwork, especially when it came to the WHA stuff. There's also a couple of books that are out of print now, both by Jack Laudier. One called Forever Whalers, which really does a great job tracking the first 15 years of the history of the franchise from 1972 to 1987. That was absolutely invaluable when it came to working as a resource.
Howard's got his own book,
Oh yeah, Slim and None. So and that wouldn't be
Slim and None.
That was a good book.
yeah,
Good
yeah,
book.
a lot of good stuff in there. So
After all the research you've done, and being a fan, do you think Hartford would be able to support a team in its current capacity?
there would be a lot that would have to happen. I think that it would start with a new building, and I don't think in this current financial climate, you're gonna get a new
Nobody's
building.
downtown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hartford, downtown Hartford is not, you guys, a lot of you guys can remember. Hartford,
Oh, yeah.
downtown Hartford in the 1980s,
Yeah.
on a
Yeah.
game night, that was.
Even when it wasn't game night, it was the place to be.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
My theory is you can partner, first of all, if the NHL will allow you to put a team in Hartford again or in Connecticut because you have regional issues, Boston, New York. If you could partner with either Mohegan Sun or Foxwoods and have them build you a 18,000 seat arena.
Mhm.
The San Francisco 49ers play 60 miles outside of San Francisco.
Mhm.
They're still called the San Francisco 49ers. You could put a team at Foxwoods, call them the Hartford Whalers.
Wampum Whalers.
Yeah, yeah. But you could put a team in one of those buildings, and I think that would be a start. I talked to people at the end of the book. I talked to people in Seattle who lost the Sonics, and I said, "Do you have any words of wisdom or encouragement for people who want a team to come back to Hartford, a hockey team to come back to Hartford?" He says, "Never stop fighting." Because you never know when there's a billionaire hedge fund owner around the corner who grew up like us, whose life's goal is to bring an NHL team back to Hartford. Because you don't know when that's gonna happen. So as long as you keep that light on, as long as you keep pushing, as long as you, kind of,
Didn't Howard, he was in the past 5-10 years, wasn't he?
he's,
Back in Connecticut?
yeah, and he's worked with the Connecticut Whale. He's done some stuff, but he would
He's still.
he would be an ideal front man to be able to bring, but I think he's a little bit older and you need it takes a lot to be able to be that guy. And again, if you have a billionaire who says, hey, I grew up in the Whalers, I love the Whalers. I've got an extra couple billion, to buy a hockey team, buy the Arizona Coyotes and move them to New England.
Would they be able to put the Whaler name back on it?
Yeah, you could make it work. You can make it, I mean, you would have to jump through a lot.
Mhm.
A lot would have to happen. But if you keep hope alive, there's nothing wrong with investing in hope.
Now the theme should start playing, right? So I hate to break it up. Any additional questions or? Because what I want to do is give Chris a chance. If you'd like to purchase a book, we have books at the back register and then downstairs at the front register. And Chris has graciously agreed to stick around, sign those books for you, personalize them if you'd like it personalized. What we can do is have people go out this way if you can, and then come back around here with your book, because we'll have Chris at the end of the table signing books, if that works for you. So a couple more, any more questions, or?
I'm also,
Do you want to do the theme song?
if you guys, I don't know if any of you guys are on social media. I'm on social media at C Price Globe. And in addition to just kind of generally doing a lot of Patriots and a lot of just kind of Boston sports stuff, I also will just kind of be goofy with the Whalers from time to time. And so if you ever have Whalers questions, if you ever want to talk, hit me up.
And he's also been on with Brian on WTIC 1080. He was on this morning. We're going to try to get him back on tomorrow morning on WTIC 1080 or WTIC.com. Around 4 to 7 or so.